To describe the Mississippi Delta Hot Tamale in one sentence is to tell you it's the best thing you've ever put in your mouth. It's unlike anything else. It cannot be duplicated. It is made with beef or pork, although some people now use chicken or turkey to try to make them a little healthier. They are wrapped with masa or cornmeal and a variety of seasonings, with recipes that are as closely guarded as the secret grandpa took to the grave. And some of these tamale recipes do go to the grave because they're not passed on. Wrapped in a corn shuck. There are a few places that you will find them wrapped in coffee filters or parchment paper. That's preference of whoever makes them, but the corn shuck is traditional. And they got here through the migrant Mexican worker. Some people think they came in after the Spanish-American War, but the migrant Mexican worker brought them in and introduced them to the area. And people have often asked, well, why here? Why did it catch on? And I think it's because the ingredients that it takes to make a hot tamale, and when they came into this to the Delta, they were just tamales. We made them hot tamales. But the ingredients that were in that hot tamale, in the tamale, were ingredients that you would find in most homes. And you will also find that most of the hot tamale makers, especially when hot tamales were first introduced to the area, were African American cooks. So, it was the beef or the pork, primarily pork in the beginning, the cornmeal or the masa, and then seasonings. And then you wrap it up in that corn shuck. All that was readily available at the kitchen. And for those who have never seen one, it's a tubular food about 4 to 6 inches long. The top is open. It's cooked in that corn shuck. You take the corn shuck off before you eat it. But it was also a portable food that could be taken to the field. And it didn't have to be hot. It could be served at room temperature. So the farm worker could pack it up in his knapsack for lunch or his brown bag, and then you could push it up just like you would a push-up popsicle. And nowadays, people will make them with cheese or tomatoes and spinach. They make vegetarian versions of them. People are constantly trying new things with the hot tamale. And the thing about hot tamales that just fascinates me, you can have a machine that will actually form the tamale for you. You cook the meat, you get your masa or your cornmeal ready, the two have got to go together. Some people use something called an extruder, where you put the meat on one side and your cornmeal on the other, and it all comes out. Some people still do it by hand. I love to see it rolled by hand. But there is no machine that will take the place of human hands rolling it in that corn shuck. No matter where you go to get a hot tamale, and they're in Chicago, all throughout the South, they're beginning to spread out as people from Mississippi and from the Delta move out into the country. They're in lots of other places now, but human hands still have to touch that hot tamale to roll it up, always. And to me, that's always putting a little love and some good old Delta spirit back into it, and that's part of what makes it good.
I said she wouldn't send me no kind of word. She turned a little back on me about some old low-down thing she heard. But I'm going away, baby. I'm going to stay a very long time.
All the memories of growing up in the Delta make me happy. The Delta is just such a unique place. It's unlike any other place in Mississippi, but I have memories of, playing outside and running behind the mosquito truck, which comes up all the time, which we're not allowed to do anymore. But the Delta, for me, growing up, I always remember cotton in the fields. And I remember cotton being very, very tall. And as I got older, I wondered why the cotton wasn't as tall. But it wasn't until I got to be an adult with children I realized because it had been genetically altered. And it was for a good reason. But I just remembered cotton being, 6 feet tall, to me anyway, to a kid. And I loved seeing those fields full of whatever was being grown, whether it was the cotton, soybeans, rice, and later we had the corn. And those memories as a child, I never realized then, so many years later as an adult, that I would end up living on a farm and be married to a farmer and get to see cotton and soybeans and rice growing right out my back door. So it's like reliving my childhood in one respect and watching the earth give back. But the Delta is just such a wonderful place. The memories are vivid, hearing about and getting to meet famous writers that I was in awe of as a kid, as an adult getting to meet and talk with one-on-one and becoming friends with some of them. And that was always really special because I always thought that the writers and the artists, the painters and the sculptors that were from the Mississippi Delta were unlike the artists and painters and sculptors from anywhere else. In about 2015, I was invited to be a part of the Arkansas Book Festival as a speaker on a couple of their panels that were dealing with food, since I had just written a book about Delta Hot Tamales. And I had looked at the list of who all was going to be there, the other writers and authors and presenters, to see if I knew anybody. There were some names that sounded kind of familiar, but one name stuck out to me and I got so excited. It was Beverly Lowry from Greenville and had been writing novels for years and years, and I so wanted to meet her. And she had been away from Greenville for years. She and her family had moved away from here shortly after she'd graduated high school. I go to check into the hotel. My husband's parking the car, and I walk into the lobby of the hotel, and there she is. I recognized her. She's checking in. I waited for her to get through. I was fangirling big time, and I went up to her, and I said, "Miss Lowry," and she said, "Yes." I introduced myself, and I said, "I'm from Greenville," and nice to meet you. We shook hands, and I said, "I look forward to hearing your presentation and seeing you later." Well, I thought that would be it. Well, I had actually brought the Beverly Lowry books from home that I had in hopes of running into her and asking her to sign them. Well, before the weekend was over, we were hanging out at a bourbon bar, trying bourbon and having a great meal. We went to this reception, and she and my husband and I were standing there, and we're looking around and going, we need to go somewhere and get a real drink and some real food. And we did. We spent the rest of the weekend together, and we didn't speak for several months after that. And then suddenly I get an email out of the blue from her, and she's working on her next book, which is a true crime story, and it involved Leland, Mississippi, and she had reached out to me for some information. Well, since then, she has stayed in my home countless times. We email, we text, we talk, we've become friends. So that particular meeting with her really led to a lifelong friendship, and she's just a fabulous person, and I love it when she comes to visit me. I never thought anything like that would happen. Wildlife was always a part of our household because my dad hunted, my big brother hunted. We ate wild game. I grew up eating venison. I can distinctly remember being at my grandmother's house, and I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and she had cooked up some wild rabbit and rice and gravy and cornbread, and it was so good. And I can still remember sitting there at the counter in her kitchen eating that. So I grew up around the game in that respect, but it was always really neat when you went out into the woods or went somewhere where you were actually able to see a deer or a coyote or a fox or something like that. But my experience with growing up around the wildlife in the Delta was that, we feasted on it. That was a big thing for us. It was part of our table. That's what we did.
I'm gonna still get long time. You know I'm coming back now, honey. Ooh, baby, until you change your mind. I wake up every morning feeling sick and bad. I say soon every morning I'll be feeling mighty sick and bad.
I get tied up with the hot tamale makers because talking to the folks that make hot tamales, because every one of them has a different story. Why they got into it, where the recipes came from, why they continue to do it. It is a hard, thankless thing to do to make hot tamales in a way, because it's a 2-day process. You know, you've got, if your sole business is making hot tamales and that's all you're doing, you've got to work hard at it. And I love hearing the stories of the people that make them and why they do it, how they got into it, how their families got into it. And I listen very intently to those stories because those are my people. Those are the people around me. Those are people that I've gotten to know personally, people whose hot tamales I will go eat and seek out. But I'm interested in these hot tamale makers as people as well. I can call them up and just say, hey, how are you? And that all came from listening to their story and getting wrapped up in their own storytelling and what they were telling me. The best advice I could give to someone who's thinking about being a journalist or being a writer or just want to be a better storyteller, listen. We all love to talk. We all love to share whatever we know or an experience. You tell me about something, oh yeah, I did that too. Or I had this experience. But the best storytellers are also the folks that listen so you can tell those stories. When you listen, not only do you hear the words of what that story is, but you hear what's not being said. You see facial expressions, you see body movement, you hear the tone of the voice, you hear emotion. And in retelling a story, those components are just as important as the story itself. And to me, that is the biggest lesson that any journalist or writer should learn, is to be able to listen. You can learn how to craft those words. You can learn how to put them on paper to be spoken into a video camera or to be given to a radio or TV audience or to go into a book or magazine article. But you also want to be able to share that emotion and the passion that you heard this story from that person. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to learn. It was a hard lesson for me to learn. As a young journalist, we all come out of school thinking, oh, we know it. We learned how to do this. We did that. You know, I can do this. And you get in there and that first week you find out, I don't know diddly squat. So you have to learn real quick wherever your first stop is, okay, this is how they want it done. And then you think back, well, they taught me how to do it this way. And while the technique may be a little different from shop to shop, you're still going to do the same basic thing. But no matter where you go, listen. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. Nobody ever told me that was part of it, that I really needed to listen. It's like you're listening to somebody give an interview and I'm taking notes or recording the interview and I'm going, okay, I got what I need. But you listen to everything they say. There may be another story there. There may be more to the story you're telling to make it grow, but then also hear the passion in the voice of the person that's telling the story.